Good evening, and welcome back to SleepWise. Tonight, we begin with something close, ordinary, and quietly essential. Nutrition, the long conversation between your body and the outside world. And if SleepWise has become part of your evenings, please follow the channel and share it with someone who might enjoy falling asleep while learning too. For most of human history, food was not a theory. It was not a trend, a label, or a debate. It was weather, season, distance, instinct, and memory. It was the sweetness of ripe fruit, the comfort of cooked grain, the richness of milk, the rare gift of fat in colder times, the deep relief of water after thirst. Long before people spoke of protein or iron or blood sugar, they already knew in the oldest way that food could restore strength, quiet hunger, sharpen attention, and bring a fleeting feeling of safety. Even now, after centuries of science, the central truth of nutrition remains simple. Food is not only fuel, it is also raw material. It becomes us. A meal is gradually transformed into warmth in the hands, motion in the legs, repair in the muscles, signals in the nerves, and structure in the skin, bone, and blood. What begins on a plate becomes part of the living architecture of the self. This is why nutrition can feel so personal. We do not simply consume food. We enter into a partnership with it. A grain of rice, a leaf, an egg, a piece of fish, a spoonful of yogurt, a handful of nuts. Each carries energy gathered from sunlight, soil, water, and time. The body receives these offerings and begins its quiet labor. It breaks, dissolves, sorts, transports, stores, and rebuilds. It takes what is useful, sets aside what is extra, and tries to keep the whole system in balance. Balance is one of the body's favorite ideas, though it never speaks aloud. It is always adjusting temperature, fluids, blood sugar, hormones, appetite, repair, and rest. Nutrition is woven into all of it. Food powers movement, but it also supports immunity, healing, growth, concentration, hormone production, and sleep. Some nutrients give energy. Some build tissue. Some help chemical reactions happen at the right time. So tonight is not about rules, guilt, or the loud promises that often surround food in the modern world. It is about returning softly to first principles. What does the body actually need from food? How does it turn a meal into energy, tissue, and thought? Why do some meals leave us steady, while others disappear like a spark? As the world grows quieter, we will follow that story together. From ancient hunger to digestion, from carbohydrates and fats to vitamins, minerals, fiber, hydration, and sleep, we will move slowly through the gentle science of nourishment. For now, let one thought rest beside you. Every day of your life, your body has been performing this patient miracle in silence. And tonight, we begin to notice it. If the modern world speaks about nutrition in labels, numbers, and headlines, the older human story began in landscapes, seasons, and the search for enough. For early humans, food was rarely guaranteed. A meal depended on weather, migration, the habits of animals, the memory of paths, and the ability to notice what the land offered at a given time. Some days brought abundance, fruit, seeds gathered in quantity, fish caught in shallow water. Other days brought uncertainty, and with it, a sharper awareness of the body's needs. Long before laboratories, the human body was a skilled teacher. Hunger signaled emptiness. Fatigue hinted at dwindling energy. Salt, sweetness, bitterness, and sourness all carried information. Sweetness often suggested quick energy. Bitterness could sometimes warn of toxins. Rich, fatty foods brought dense fuel that could be stored for leaner days. Over thousands of years, people learned not through theory first, but through repetition, consequence, and survival. This does not mean ancient diets were perfect or that all traditional eating was balanced by design. Human beings have always lived within limits set by geography, climate, technology, and luck. A coastal community would eat differently from a desert one. A cold northern winter demanded different nourishment than a tropical forest. Food was local because it had to be. Nutrition in that older world was shaped by the land long before it was shaped by industry. And still, our bodies remember some of that world. We remain responsive to scarcity and abundance. We are drawn to sweetness because, in nature, it often meant energy. We can store excess energy because uncertain seasons once made that ability useful. We often enjoy variety because variety increased the chance of obtaining different nutrients. Even now, beneath supermarkets and delivery apps, the body carries instincts formed across a much longer history. Cooking changed that history profoundly. Fire-softened roots made grains and tubers easier to digest, improved the safety of many foods, and allowed more calories to be extracted with less chewing. In a quiet way, cooking gave the body access to more usable nourishment. It widened the menu of human survival, and many scientists believe helped support the growing energy demands of the human brain. Agriculture later changed the story again. Fields of grain, domesticated animals, and stored food created stability, but also new imbalances. A reliable staple could feed large populations, yet dependence on a narrow set of foods sometimes reduced dietary variety. So, when we speak about nutrition tonight, we are stepping into one of humanity's oldest relationships. The long effort to understand how the outer world becomes inner life. And as we continue, the body waits patiently, doing what it has always done, adapting, asking, storing, and surviving. Before we move into particular nutrients, it helps to begin with a simpler question. What, in the broadest sense, does the body actually need food to do? The answer is beautifully straightforward. Food helps the body perform three great tasks. It provides energy, it provides building material, and it provides support for regulation, the countless invisible processes that keep life steady from one moment to the next. Energy is perhaps the easiest part to imagine. Every heartbeat, every breath, every lifted hand, every thought passing through the brain requires energy. Even in deep rest, the body is busy. Cells maintain gradients, organs communicate, tissues repair. Temperature is protected. The immune system patrols quietly. Sleep itself is not the absence of work, but a different kind of work. Food helps make all of this possible. But food is not only burned, it is also used to build. The body is not fixed once adulthood arrives. Skin is renewed, blood cells are replaced, enzymes are produced and broken down. Bone is remodeled. Muscles respond to use, illness, age, and recovery. Hormones are made from raw materials. Cell membranes must be maintained. To live is to rebuild, and rebuilding requires substance. Then there is regulation, the hidden middle ground that is easy to overlook because it is so constant when it works well. Nutrients help nerves fire, muscles contract, blood clot, oxygen travel, fluids balance, and chemical reactions unfold in the proper sequence. Many of these roles are not dramatic. They are small, repeated, and essential. This is one reason nutrition can feel both simple and complex at the same time. The simple part is that bodies need energy, structure, and regulation. The complex part is that no single food does everything, and no single moment of eating explains the whole story. Nutrition is cumulative. It is shaped meal by meal, day by day, season by season. The body is also adaptive. When food is scarce, it shifts priorities. When protein is low, repair may be less efficient. When energy intake rises above immediate need, the body stores some for later. When certain vitamins or minerals fall short over time, quiet changes begin to appear, gradually like a dimming light. The body is remarkably forgiving, but it is always taking notes. This broader view can be calming. It reminds us that nutrition is not about moral categories or perfection. It is about meeting recurring needs in a living system. Food helps us move, but it also helps us think. It helps us recover, but it also helps us maintain. It supports obvious strength and also subtle balance. So, as we continue, we can carry this framework softly beside us. Energy, structure, and regulation. Nearly everything that follows will return to these three quiet purposes as the body keeps working through the night. Now we arrive at the first of the body's major fuels. Carbohydrates, often discussed loudly in the modern world, though their actual story is much calmer than the arguments around them. Carbohydrates are molecules made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and they are found in foods as familiar as fruit, oats, rice, potatoes, beans, milk, and bread. Some are simple in structure like sugars. Others are more complex, arranged in longer chains like starches. But in many cases, the body's digestive work gradually brings them toward a common destination. Glucose, a form of sugar that cells can use for energy. This matters because the body, especially the brain, often relies heavily on glucose. The brain can use a remarkable share of the body's daily energy, even though it makes up only a small part of body weight. Muscles also draw on carbohydrate, especially during more intense effort. So when people speak of carbohydrates as though they are unnecessary by definition, they miss part of the picture. Carbohydrates are not a mistake in nature. They are one of the body's most accessible energy sources. What matters very often is form and context. A bowl of lentils, a piece of fruit, or a serving of oats arrives with fiber, water, and a slower rhythm of digestion. A highly refined sweet drink or dessert may enter the bloodstream much faster, especially when eaten on its own. The difference is not moral. The body is not offended by sugar, but it does respond differently depending on how quickly a carbohydrate is broken down, what else accompanies it, and what the body happens to need in that moment. The body also has a clever way of storing carbohydrate. Some glucose is held as glycogen, mainly in the liver and muscles, ready to be called upon between meals or during movement. These reserves are limited compared with stored fat, but they are useful precisely because they are easier to access. Plants create carbohydrate through photosynthesis, capturing energy from sunlight and storing it in chemical form. In that sense, carbohydrate is one of the most direct ways sunlight enters the food chain and then enters us. Grain, fruit, beans, roots, and vegetables all carry traces of this quiet exchange between earth, light, and life. Of course, carbohydrate needs are not identical for every person. Activity, age, health, meal pattern, and individual response all matter. But at the foundational level, carbohydrates belong in the story of nourishment, not as villains or saviors, but as tools. They provide energy, support movement, help maintain blood glucose, and in many whole foods, arrive bundled with vitamins, minerals, and fiber. So tonight, we let carbohydrates return to their proper scale. Not a fad, not a fear, but one important part of how the body is fed. One more way the outer world becomes warmth, effort, and thought. If carbohydrates often serve as one of the body's easier fuels, protein plays a different role. Quieter, perhaps, but just as essential. Protein is the great builder, repairer, and craftsman of the human body. Proteins are made from smaller units called amino acids. During digestion, dietary protein is broken apart into these pieces, absorbed, and then used to build the proteins the body needs. Some amino acids can be made by the body itself. Others must come from food, which is why regular protein intake matters. It is not only about muscle, it is about maintenance on a far wider scale. Muscle tissue does rely on protein, especially during growth, recovery, aging, or periods of training. But so do enzymes, the tiny workers that help chemical reactions proceed. So do many hormones, immune molecules, transport proteins in the blood, and structures within skin, hair, nails, and connective tissue. Even the proteins that help carry oxygen, move substances through cell membranes, and support fluid balance are part of this larger hidden architecture. This is why protein cannot be reduced to the language of athletes and gym culture. Every person needs protein because every living body is constantly repairing, replacing, and rebuilding. We do not stay the same from week to week. Cells wear out, tissues renew, illness increases demand, healing asks for raw material, age changes efficiency. Protein is one of the ways the body keeps up with the steady erosion and renewal of ordinary life. Protein comes from many sources: eggs, fish, poultry, meat, yogurt, cheese, beans, lentils, tofu, tempeh, nuts, seeds, and whole grains all contribute in different ways. Some foods contain a full range of essential amino acids in proportions that are especially useful to the body. Others may be lower in one or more amino acids. Yet across a varied diet, these needs can still be met. Unlike carbohydrate and fat, protein is not something the body stores in a dedicated reserve for future use. It can be used for energy when needed, but that is not its preferred purpose. Protein is more valuable as structure and function. In a sense, it is less like firewood and more like timber, less like a spark and more like scaffolding. Adequate protein also helps with fullness. Meals that include enough protein often feel more satisfying and steady, partly because protein digests more gradually than some refined carbohydrates, and because it participates in signaling related to appetite. So when we think of protein tonight, we can picture it not as a trend, but as patient craftsmanship. It is the quiet material from which the body repairs torn places, builds useful tools, and carries out thousands of hidden tasks. In silence, hour after hour, protein helps hold the human form together. By now, the body has received one of its quicker fuels and one of its great building materials. But nutrition would remain incomplete without fat, perhaps the most misunderstood of the macronutrients, and certainly one of the most ancient. Fat is dense with energy. Gram for gram, it provides more than twice the energy of carbohydrate or protein, which made it deeply valuable in older human environments where food was uncertain and survival often depended on reserves. But fat is not important only because it stores energy. It is also part of the body's structure. Cell membranes, the delicate boundaries that surround each living cell, rely heavily on fats. Certain hormones are built from fat-related substances. The brain, too, contains large amounts of lipid material, and many of the body's quieter systems depend on fat's steady presence. Fat also helps the body absorb certain vitamins, including vitamins A, D, E, and K. Without enough dietary fat, those nutrients are not handled as effectively. In this way, fat is not merely a fuel or a storage depot, but also a partner in the transport and use of other essential compounds. Not all fats are arranged the same way. Some, often called unsaturated fats, are common in foods like olive oil, nuts, seeds, avocados, and many kinds of fish. Others, called saturated fats, are found in foods like butter, cheese, and fatty cuts of meat, as well as certain oils. These categories matter in physiology, but not in the dramatic way nutrition headlines often suggest. The body does not respond to food as though it were reading a slogan. It responds to patterns, amounts, context, and the wider quality of a person's diet over time. There are also fats the body cannot make on its own in sufficient amounts, including certain omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. These are often called essential fatty acids because they must come from food. They help support membranes, signaling, and inflammatory balance, and remind us again that nutrition is not just about calories. It is about giving the body access to particular materials it knows how to use. Fat also changes the pace of a meal. Meals containing some fat often digest more slowly and can feel more satisfying, in part because they delay the emptying of the stomach and contribute to satiety signals. A meal with some healthy fat may therefore feel calmer in the body, more lingering, less like a quick rise and fall. In many modern conversations, fat was once treated as something to fear, then later, in reaction, treated by some as a kind of nutritional hero. But the body has little use for those extremes. It simply needs fat, steadily and appropriately, as part of a larger whole. So tonight, we let fat return to its true role. Not a threat, not a miracle, but one of the body's oldest companions. A source of stored sunlight, structure, softness, and durable energy. If carbohydrates, protein, and fat are the three great macronutrients, then calories are the unit by which we measure how much energy these foods can provide. And yet, the word calorie often arrives burdened with far more emotion than science. In simple terms, a calorie is a measure of energy. It tells us how much potential fuel a food contains. The body can use that fuel to keep the heart beating, the lungs moving, the brain thinking, the muscles working, and the temperature stable. Even at complete rest, the body is not idle. It is conducting a vast background symphony of life, and every part of that symphony has an energy cost. Some of this energy is spent on what is often called basal metabolism, the quiet work required just to remain alive. This includes maintaining circulation, supporting organs, regulating temperature, and preserving the basic chemistry of cells. Beyond that, energy is used for movement, digestion, immune function, repair, and adaptation. A body recovering from illness, healing a wound, growing, or carrying stress may spend energy differently from one in calmer conditions. This is why the body cannot be understood as a simple machine with fixed inputs and outputs. It is adaptive. Two people may eat the same meal and not process it in exactly the same way. Sleep, hormones, activity, muscle mass, illness, age, and genetics all shape energy use. Even the same person may have different needs in different seasons of life. When energy from food exceeds immediate need, the body stores some of it, mostly as fat, for later use. When intake falls short, the body draws from stored energy. This capacity to save and spend, to store and release, is not a flaw. It is one of the body's great survival skills, refined over a very long history of uncertain food access. And yet, calories alone do not tell the whole nutritional story. A meal is more than its energy total. It also contains, or does not contain, protein, fiber, vitamins, minerals, water, and countless other compounds that affect fullness, digestion, blood sugar, and long-term health. Two foods with the same calorie count may leave the body feeling very different. This does not make calories meaningless. It simply places them in their proper context. They are one lens, useful but incomplete, a way of understanding energy without confusing energy for nourishment itself. Perhaps the gentlest way to think of calories is this: they are not moral points, nor accusations, nor proof of virtue or failure. They are units of available energy, part of the body's practical economy. The body receives, spends, stores, and draws upon this energy in silence, as it always has. And so, we can let the idea soften. Calories are not the whole story of nutrition, but they are part of the story of life. One more way of measuring the invisible work your body performs even now, as you lie still and begin to drift. Once food has been chosen, tasted, and swallowed, a quieter story begins. Digestion is one of the body's most patient processes, so constant that we rarely notice it, yet so intricate that even an ordinary meal sets thousands of actions into motion. The journey begins in the mouth. Chewing does more than break food into smaller pieces. It increases surface area, making later digestion easier, while saliva begins the first stages of chemical breakdown. Some carbohydrates, for example, start to be digested here before the food has even reached the stomach. The meal is then guided downward through the esophagus, a muscular passage whose movements are steady, automatic, and mostly beyond awareness. The stomach receives this mixture and continues the work. Here, food is churned and mixed with acid and enzymes. Protein begins to unravel more fully in this environment, its structure loosening, so that later digestion becomes possible. The stomach is not simply a container. It is a chamber of preparation, gradually turning a meal into a softer substance that can be released onward in measured amounts. From there, the food enters the small intestine, where much of digestion and absorption truly unfolds. This long and folded passage is lined with tiny projections that increase surface area dramatically, creating a landscape built for exchange. Enzymes from the pancreas continue breaking apart carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Bile, produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder, helps disperse fats into smaller droplets so they can be handled more effectively. Then comes absorption, one of nutrition's great hidden miracles. Sugars, amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, and water begin crossing into the body through the intestinal lining. Some move directly into the bloodstream. Others, especially many fat-related compounds, travel first through the lymphatic system before joining circulation. From here, nutrients are delivered to tissues that need them, stored for later or processed further by the liver. The large intestine takes up the story afterward, reclaiming water and helping manage what remains. It is also home to vast communities of microbes, whose role in health we are only gradually learning to understand. Even here, in what might seem like the final stage, the body is still sorting, recovering, and conversing with life inside it. Digestion is therefore not a single event, but a sequence of transformations. A bite becomes fragments. Fragments become molecules. Molecules become blood chemistry, cellular fuel, stored energy, rebuilt tissue. All of it happens without applause, without instruction, without your conscious supervision. And perhaps that is part of its beauty. Every meal enters the body as something visible and familiar, then disappears into a process almost river-like in its continuity. It is broken down, carried forward, separated, absorbed, and woven into life. If macronutrients are the body's largest supplies of fuel and material, then micronutrients are the smaller companions that help everything work. They are needed in far smaller amounts, yet their importance is impossible to measure by size alone. Micronutrients include vitamins and minerals, and unlike carbohydrates, protein, and fat, they do not provide calories. They are not burned for energy. Instead, they help the body release energy from food, maintain tissues, support immunity, move oxygen, regulate nerves and muscles, and coordinate countless chemical reactions. If macronutrients are timber, bricks, and stored fuel, micronutrients are more like keys, switches, messengers, and finely shaped tools. The word vitamin has an almost old-fashioned sound now, but its discovery changed how people understood disease. Conditions that had once seemed mysterious were eventually linked to missing nutrients. A lack of vitamin C contributed to scurvy. Too little vitamin D disturbed bone health. Deficiencies of certain B vitamins altered nerves, blood, and metabolism. These discoveries taught a quiet but profound lesson. Food is not only about quantity, it is also about completeness. Minerals play equally essential roles. Iron helps carry oxygen through the blood. Calcium supports bones and participates in muscle contraction and nerve signaling. Magnesium assists many enzymatic reactions. Potassium helps regulate fluid balance and electrical activity in cells. Zinc supports immunity and healing. Iodine helps the thyroid guide metabolism. Again and again, we find the same pattern: small amounts, large consequences. Because these nutrients are required only in traces or modest quantities, it can be easy to imagine they are secondary. But the body does not agree. A missing micronutrient can quietly limit processes that otherwise seem unrelated to food. Energy may feel lower, concentration may dim, bones may weaken, gradually over time. The body often compensates for as long as it can, but eventually, shortages begin to show. This is one reason dietary variety matters. Different foods carry different nutrients, and no single food contains everything in ideal proportion. Colorful plants, dairy, eggs, fish, meats, legumes, nuts, seeds, grains, and fortified foods all contribute pieces of the nutritional mosaic. Variety is not only pleasant, it is practical biology. And yet, micronutrients do not ask for perfection. They ask for enough, repeatedly, over time. The body is resilient. It stores some nutrients, uses others daily, and does its best to maintain balance. But as with so much in nutrition, patterns matter more than isolated moments. So tonight, we make room for the small things, the trace minerals, the humble vitamins, the invisible helpers. They arrive without calories and without drama, yet they allow the greater machinery of the body to proceed. Tiny, silent, and indispensable, they help turn food into function and function into life. Fiber rarely receives the same attention as protein, carbohydrate, or fat, perhaps because its gifts are quieter. It does not provide calories in the usual way, and yet it changes the experience of eating, digestion, fullness, and metabolic steadiness so profoundly that nutrition feels incomplete without it. Fiber is the part of plant food that human digestive enzymes cannot fully break down. It is found in foods like beans, lentils, oats, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and whole grains. Because it resists complete digestion, it moves through the digestive tract differently from other carbohydrates, slowing certain processes, adding bulk, and helping shape the rhythm by which food travels through the body. Some fiber is often described as soluble, meaning it can dissolve in water and form a softer, gel-like substance. This kind can help slow digestion, support steadier absorption, and contribute to a more gradual rise in blood sugar after meals. Other fiber is called insoluble, meaning it adds structure and bulk, helping move material through the digestive tract more efficiently. These categories are useful, though in real foods they often overlap, and the body responds to whole dietary patterns more than neat labels. Fiber also influences fullness. Meals built around plants rich in fiber often feel more substantial, not because they are heavy in a dramatic way, but because they take up space, require more chewing, and move more slowly through digestion. This can create a gentler sense of satisfaction, one that lingers rather than flares briefly and disappears. But one of fiber's most fascinating roles lies deeper in the gut. In the large intestine, certain fibers become food for microbes, the immense community of bacteria and other microscopic life that lives within us. These organisms are not merely passive passengers. They interact with digestion, immunity, metabolism, and perhaps even mood in ways science is still carefully mapping. When microbes ferment certain fibers, they produce compounds that can nourish the cells lining the colon and participate in broader signaling throughout the body. This is where the modern word microbiome enters the story. Though it can sound fashionable, the basic idea is simple. The human body is not entirely solitary. It contains ecosystems, and the gut is one of the richest among them. What we eat does not feed only us. It also shapes the environment in which these microbial communities live. A varied intake of plant foods tends to create more varied substrates for those inner ecosystems. Fiber, then, is not dramatic nourishment. It is patient nourishment. It softens extremes, supports movement, contributes to fullness, and helps sustain an unseen partnership between the body and its microbial companions. And like so much in nutrition, its wisdom is cumulative, built not from one perfect day of eating, but from repeated quiet choices that help the inner world remain steady. Fiber rarely receives the same attention as protein, carbohydrate, or fat, perhaps because its gifts are quieter. It does not provide calories in the usual way, and yet it changes the experience of digestion, fullness, and metabolic steadiness so profoundly that nutrition feels incomplete without it. Fiber is the part of plant food that human digestive enzymes cannot fully break down. It is found in foods like beans, lentils, oats, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and whole grains. Because it resists complete digestion, it moves through the digestive tract differently from other carbohydrates, slowing certain processes, adding bulk, and helping shape the rhythm by which food travels through the body. Some fiber is often described as soluble, meaning it can dissolve in water and form a softer, gel-like substance. This kind can help slow digestion, support steadier absorption, and contribute to a more gradual rise in blood sugar after meals. Other fiber is called insoluble, meaning it adds structure and bulk, helping move material through the digestive tract more efficiently. These categories are useful, though in real foods they often overlap, and the body responds to whole dietary patterns more than neat labels. Fiber also influences fullness. Meals built around plants rich in fiber often feel more substantial, not because they are heavy in a dramatic way, but because they take up space, require more chewing, and move more slowly through digestion. This can create a gentler sense of satisfaction, one that lingers rather than flares briefly and disappears. But one of fiber's most fascinating roles lies deeper in the gut. In the large intestine, certain fibers become food for microbes, the immense community of bacteria and other microscopic life that lives within us. These organisms are not merely passive passengers. They interact with digestion, immunity, metabolism, and perhaps even mood in ways science is still carefully mapping. This is where the modern word microbiome enters the story. Though it can sound fashionable, the basic idea is simple. The human body is not entirely solitary. It contains ecosystems, and the gut is one of the richest among them. What we eat does not feed only us. It also shapes the environment in which these microbial communities live. A varied intake of plant foods tends to create more varied nourishment for those inner ecosystems. Different fibers feed different populations. In that sense, a bowl of beans, berries, greens, or oats is not only a meal, it is also a message sent inward to a landscape we rarely see. Fiber, then, is patient nourishment. It softens extremes, supports movement, contributes to fullness, and helps sustain an unseen partnership between the body and its microbial companions. And like so much in nutrition, its wisdom is cumulative, built not from one perfect day of eating, but from repeated quiet choices that help the inner world remain steady. The body is constantly working to maintain glucose within a useful range, not too little and not too much, because glucose is one of its central fuels, especially for the brain. After a meal containing carbohydrate, digestion begins releasing glucose into the bloodstream. In response, the pancreas releases insulin, a hormone that helps cells take up glucose and helps the body decide what to use now and what to store for later. This is not a warning sign. It is ordinary physiology happening quietly after meals every day of human life. What matters is the shape of the rise and fall. Meals rich in refined carbohydrate, especially when eaten quickly or without much fiber, protein, or fat, may lead to a faster increase in blood glucose. In many people, that can be followed by a sharper decline, sometimes accompanied by fatigue, renewed hunger, or a restless sense that the meal did not truly last. By contrast, meals that include fiber, protein, fat, and less refined carbohydrate often digest more gradually, leading to a steadier experience of energy and fullness. This does not mean the body demands perfection or that every meal must be engineered with precision. The body is flexible. It can manage celebration, irregularity, and variety. But over time, patterns matter. Repeated swings in blood sugar and appetite can shape how steady or unstable the day feels. And many people notice this not in laboratory values first, but in ordinary experience. A crash after a sweet breakfast, irritability when lunch was too light, evening cravings after a day of scattered eating. Muscle also plays an important role in this story. Active muscle tissue helps use glucose efficiently, which is one reason movement and nutrition are so closely connected. A walk after a meal, regular exercise, and adequate sleep all influence how the body handles blood sugar, reminding us again that nutrition does not operate in isolation. The liver helps maintain stability too. Between meals, it can release stored glucose to keep blood sugar from falling too low. During longer periods without food, the body adjusts again, drawing on stored fuels and changing its priorities with remarkable competence. It is always trying to protect continuity, always trying to keep the lights on. So, blood sugar is not simply about avoiding sweets or fearing carbohydrate. It is about rhythm, composition, timing, and the body's effort to maintain balance across changing circumstances. A meal is not just a list of nutrients. It is a signal that sets systems in motion. When meals are built in a way that the body can handle gently, energy often feels steadier, concentration calmer, and hunger less chaotic. The effect is not dramatic like a burst of caffeine, and perhaps that is the deeper lesson here. The body does not always need intensity. Often, it prefers a smoother current, one that carries nourishment forward without too many sharp turns along the way. Hunger can feel simple when it first arrives, a hollow space, a passing thought of food, a soft pull toward the kitchen. But the deeper story of hunger and fullness is far more intricate, shaped by biology, routine, memory, emotion, stress, sleep, and the body's continual effort to keep itself alive. At one level, hunger is a survival signal. It helps ensure that energy and nutrients are replenished. Hormones participate in this conversation. Ghrelin, produced largely in the stomach, tends to rise before meals and encourage appetite. Leptin, produced mainly by fat tissue, helps signal longer-term energy sufficiency. Other hormones and neural signals join in, carrying information between the gut, the brain, the pancreas, and beyond. Yet, appetite is not governed by biology alone. Human beings do not eat only because the body is empty. We also eat because food is present, because others are eating, because the clock says noon, because the evening feels lonely, because celebration calls for sweetness, because stress narrows the mind toward comfort, or because habit has quietly built a pathway the body now expects to follow. This is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence that eating is woven into life at many levels at once. The brain does not separate nourishment from memory as neatly as a textbook might. A familiar soup may feel calming, not only because it contains calories and salt, but because it recalls safety. A dessert may satisfy more than taste. A skipped meal may be felt later not only as hunger, but as irritability, fogginess, or restlessness. Sleep has a role here too. When sleep is shortened or poor, appetite signals often shift. Many people notice increased hunger, stronger cravings, or a greater pull toward highly palatable foods after insufficient rest. The body, sensing strain, may seek quick energy and comfort. Once again, nutrition and the larger conditions of life are inseparable. Fullness is also more than the moment when the stomach is physically stretched. It is influenced by the volume of food, the presence of protein and fiber, the pace of eating, and the mind's ability to register that a meal has happened. Meals eaten in haste may pass through awareness so quickly that satisfaction lags behind intake. Slower meals often allow the body's signals to be noticed more clearly. This complexity can be strangely comforting. It means that eating is not a test of moral character. Hunger is not failure. Appetite is not always a clean reflection of need. The body is integrating many streams of information at once, trying to protect itself with the tools it has. So tonight, we can set aside the harsh idea that eating should be governed by willpower alone. The truth is gentler. The body asks, The mind interprets, life interferes, and we respond as best we can. In that ongoing conversation between hunger and fullness, curiosity is often more useful than judgment, and understanding more nourishing than shame. Water seems almost too ordinary to mention beside proteins, vitamins, and minerals. And yet life depends on it so completely that nutrition cannot be understood without it. Food may bring energy and structure, but water is the medium through which so much of that nourishment moves. The human body is largely water. Blood carries nutrients through a watery solution. Cells are filled with fluid. Digestive juices, saliva, lymph, sweat, and urine all depend on water's quiet presence. It supports temperature regulation, circulation, joint lubrication, digestion, waste removal, and the countless chemical reactions that allow living tissue to function. Thirst is the body's simplest reminder of this need, though it is not always the earliest one. Mild dehydration can arrive as fatigue, headache, dry mouth, dizziness, or a subtle dimming of concentration. In hot climates, during illness, after exercise, or with increased sweating, the body's demands can rise noticeably. Water leaves us through breath, perspiration, urine, and stool, and must be replenished regularly, even when we are not especially aware of its loss. Hydration also involves electrolytes, minerals that carry electric charge in body fluids. Sodium, potassium, chloride, magnesium, and others help regulate fluid balance, nerve impulses, and muscle contraction. The body maintains these concentrations with remarkable care. Too little or too much can disturb function, which is why hydration is not only about volume, but also about balance. Sodium has a complicated reputation, yet it is essential. It helps maintain fluid balance and supports nerve and muscle function. Food contributes to hydration more than we often realize. Fruits, vegetables, soups, yogurt, and many cooked foods contain substantial water. In that sense, nourishment is not divided cleanly between eating and drinking. The two overlap. A bowl of fruit or a plate of vegetables can hydrate as well as feed. The kidneys are central caretakers in this story. They filter the blood, conserve what is needed, remove what is not, and help regulate water and mineral balance hour by hour. Their work is so constant and so hidden that we rarely consider it unless something goes wrong. Perhaps that is why water feels so easy to overlook. It is everywhere within us, and therefore almost invisible to thought. But every nutrient that is transported, every cell that is maintained, every breath that cools, and every drop of sweat that protects us depends on this simple molecule. So tonight, we make room for water, not as an afterthought, but as the body's quiet landscape, the clear medium through which nourishment travels, dissolves, circulates, and sustains life. Few topics in modern nutrition create more confusion than processed food, partly because the phrase itself covers too much ground. Processing is not one thing. It is a spectrum. And the body responds to foods in all their variety, not according to a single label stamped on a package. At the most basic level, processing simply means that a food has been altered from its original state. Washing lettuce is processing. Grinding oats is processing. Freezing peas, fermenting yogurt, roasting nuts, drying beans, milling flour, pasteurizing milk, and canning tomatoes are all forms of processing. Many of these changes improve safety, shelf life, digestibility, convenience, or access. Human beings have processed food for a very long time. The confusion begins when all processing is spoken of as though it were equal. A plain yogurt and a brightly colored snack cake may both come in containers, but they are not nutritionally interchangeable. Some processed foods remain close to their original ingredients and can fit easily into a nourishing diet. Others are heavily refined, engineered for shelf stability, convenience, and repeated craving. They may contain large amounts of added sugar, salt, refined starch, industrial fats, flavoring agents, and textures that make them easy to eat quickly and in large amounts. The body notices these differences not because it judges, but because composition changes physiology. Foods that are stripped of fiber, rapidly digested, and easy to overconsume may lead to less lasting fullness and more abrupt shifts in blood sugar and appetite. And yet even here, absolutism is rarely helpful. Convenience matters, budget matters, access matters, time, family life, culture, and personal energy all shape what people eat. A frozen vegetable mix, canned beans, fortified cereal, whole grain bread, or jarred tomato sauce may be processed and still be deeply useful. Nutrition lives in the real world, not in a fantasy pantry stocked only with perfect ingredients and endless time. A gentler question, then, is not whether a food is processed at all, but how processed it is, what it contains, what role it plays, and what broader dietary pattern surrounds it. Is it adding nourishment, convenience, and practicality, or mostly calories with little staying power? Does it help build a decent meal or replace one so often that other needs get crowded out? This way of thinking leaves room for realism without surrendering to confusion. The goal is not purity, it is perspective. The body can handle celebration, shortcuts, and packaged foods. What tends to matter more is the overall pattern. How often meals include fiber, protein, variety, and foods that still resemble the living world from which nourishment first came. In that wider view, processed food becomes less a moral category and more a practical one, something to understand with nuance rather than fear. A nourishing way of eating is often described as balance, though balance in nutrition is not a rigid formula. It is less like a perfect equation and more like a steady arrangement of support. A balanced meal usually contains some combination of energy, structure, and regulation. perhaps a source of carbohydrate for fuel, protein for repair, healthy fat for staying power, and plants for fiber, vitamins, minerals, and texture. Not every plate must accomplish everything at once, but over time, the body benefits when these elements appear with some regularity. This is one reason meals built from only a single note often feel incomplete. A sugary pastry may offer quick energy, but little staying power. A bowl of greens alone may provide micronutrients and fiber, but not enough fuel or protein to last very long. A protein shake may help with one need while missing the sensory and nutritional fullness of a more varied meal. The body tends to appreciate meals that are mixed, layered, and a little more patient. Color matters more than it first appears to. Different pigments in plant foods often signal different protective compounds and micronutrients. Orange vegetables may bring carotenoids. Dark greens often carry folate, magnesium, and vitamin K. Berries offer their own families of plant compounds. Beans, grains, nuts, seeds, fish, dairy, eggs, and meats each contribute differently too. Variety is not only pleasurable, it is a practical way of covering more nutritional ground without turning every meal into a calculation. Balance also does not need to happen perfectly within each individual meal. Some days breakfast is light, lunch is hurried, and dinner is more complete. Some weeks include celebration meals, travel meals, simple meals, and more intentional ones. The body is not keeping score in the harsh way many people imagine. It responds to patterns that accumulate over time. A generally nourishing rhythm matters more than any isolated deviation. Pleasure belongs in this picture as well. Food that is technically balanced but joyless may not be sustainable for long. Taste, culture, comfort, and satisfaction help meals remain part of real life. In many ways, pleasure is not separate from nourishment. It can support it, making eating feel grounded and human rather than mechanical. So a balanced way of eating might be understood as flexible adequacy, enough energy, enough protein, enough plants, enough fluid, enough variety, enough enjoyment to continue, not perfection, not purity, not fear, just a recurrent effort to meet the body with steadiness. And perhaps that is why balance feels so quiet when it works. It rarely announces itself. It simply helps the day move more smoothly, hunger arrive more gently, energy remain more even, and the body feels somewhat better, supported in its long and faithful labor. Nutrition changes across the lifespan because the body itself is never truly standing still. Its needs shift with growth, age, hormones, illness, recovery, activity, and the many changing conditions of being alive. What nourishes one season of life may not be sufficient or appropriate for another. In childhood, nutrition supports rapid growth, bone development, brain development, immune learning, and the formation of lifelong habits. Energy demands are often high relative to body size, and the need for certain nutrients such as protein, calcium, iron, and essential fats can be especially important. The body is building quickly, and it asks for regular supply. Adolescence brings another surge of change. Growth accelerates, hormones shift, bone mass increases, blood volume expands, and appetite may become more variable. For some, this is also when body image concerns begin to shape eating in ways that are not always kind or informed. Yet, physiologically, adolescence is a time of real nutritional demand, not a time to regard food with unnecessary suspicion. Adulthood is sometimes spoken of as though nutritional needs stabilize completely. But even here, the story remains dynamic. Work, stress, sleep, pregnancy, activity, illness, and changing body composition all influence what the body requires. During pregnancy, for instance, needs for protein, iron, folate, iodine, and other nutrients rise because the body is building not only its own tissues, but supporting new life as well. During recovery from surgery or sickness, energy and protein needs may increase again. Later, adulthood introduces other shifts. Appetite may decline even while nutrient needs remain significant. Muscle mass can gradually decrease with age, making adequate protein and regular movement especially important. Bone health becomes more central. Hydration may be less reliably signaled by thirst. Absorption of certain nutrients, including vitamin B12, may change in some people over time. None of this means nutrition becomes impossibly complicated. It simply means that nourishment is not fixed. A wise way of eating remains responsive. It notices that bodies age, heal, strain, recover, and adapt. The same person may need different things at 25 than at 65, and different things during a calm month than during one shaped by illness or stress. This can be a merciful perspective. It reminds us that eating well is not about identifying one perfect lifelong formula. It is about listening more carefully to what season the body is in and what that season seems to require. Nutrition, then, is not static knowledge. It is an ongoing relationship with change, one in which the body continues to ask, quietly but persistently, for what will help it carry on. By evening, the relationship between nutrition and sleep becomes easier to feel. Some meals leave the body settled and heavy in a comforting way. Others leave it restless, hot, thirsty, or too alert. What we eat does not determine sleep entirely, but it can shape the conditions in which sleep arrives. Caffeine is the most obvious example. It works by blocking adenosine, one of the chemical signals that helps build sleep pressure through the day. A cup of coffee in the morning may feel harmless by night for some people, while the same amount later in the day may linger in the system and make rest more difficult. Sensitivity varies, but the principle remains gentle and clear. What stimulates the daytime brain can sometimes follow us into the night. Alcohol can be deceptive in the opposite direction. It may make a person feel drowsy at first, yet later it often fragments sleep, alters normal sleep architecture, and can worsen snoring or breathing disruption. Sedation is not the same as restorative rest, and the body knows the difference even when the mind briefly feels relaxed. Meal timing matters too. A very heavy late meal may leave digestion still working hard as the body tries to settle. Going to bed extremely hungry, on the other hand, can also be uncomfortable, making the body feel watchful rather than secure. Many people sleep best somewhere in the middle, neither overfilled nor underfed, but gently satisfied. Blood sugar plays a role here as well. Meals that digest with more steadiness may support a calmer evening than foods that trigger quick rises and drops in energy. Very sugary foods late at night do not disturb everyone in the same way, but in some people they can contribute to a sense of inner brightness when the body is trying to dim. There are also quieter nutritional links to sleep. Magnesium participates in nerve and muscle function. Certain foods contain tryptophan, an amino acid involved in pathways related to serotonin and melatonin. Stable nourishment through the day may reduce the late-night compensation that sometimes appears as intense cravings or irregular eating. Yet, even here, perfection is not required. Sleep is influenced by light, stress, routine, temperature, breathing, health, and many other forces beyond food. Nutrition is one strand in a larger web, important but not absolute. Still, for a channel like SleepWise, perhaps that is the comforting truth. The body rests best when it feels reasonably safe, reasonably steady, and reasonably cared for. And food, taken in the right spirit and rhythm, can be part of that care. A calm supper, enough water, less caffeine late in the day, not too much alcohol, not too much hunger. These are not dramatic interventions. They are small gestures of cooperation with the night. Modern nutrition can feel strangely loud for something so old. Every year seems to bring a new certainty, a new villain, a new miracle, a new promise that the body can be mastered if only one rule is followed precisely enough. In that noise, many people stop trusting their own experience and begin to feel that eating is a puzzle they are forever solving incorrectly. Part of this confusion comes from the way nutrition is studied. It is difficult to isolate food perfectly in human life. People eat combinations, not single nutrients in a vacuum. They live within cultures, budgets, schedules, sleep patterns, stress levels, and habits. One study may focus on a mechanism in a laboratory. Another may observe large populations over time. Headlines then flatten those findings into something much sharper than the original science intended. Marketing adds another layer. Foods are sold not only as food, but as identity, aspiration, virtue, convenience, youth, control, or rebellion. Packaging speaks in the language of purity, performance, indulgence, guiltlessness, and optimization. Social media speeds everything up further, rewarding confidence more than nuance. A person can scroll through 10 contradictory claims before breakfast and begin to feel that every bite must be defended. But the body is not usually asking for extremity. Most of the quiet principles of sound nutrition are not especially glamorous. Eat a variety of foods. Include enough protein. Include plants regularly. Get some fiber. Drink enough fluid. Notice how different foods affect your energy and appetite. Make room for culture and pleasure. Understand that patterns matter more than isolated moments. This does not solve every medical or personal question. Some people have allergies, chronic disease, digestive disorders, ethical commitments, performance goals, or medical conditions that require more individualized care. But beneath the complexity, there remains a broad center that is surprisingly stable. Perhaps the deepest confusion of modern nutrition is the hope that there must be one perfect answer. Yet bodies differ, and lives differ. Good nourishment may wear many shapes. The point is not to find one eternal menu. It is to understand principles well enough that they can travel with you through ordinary life. So, if nutrition has ever felt intimidating, let that feeling soften here. The field contains real science, yes, but also real uncertainty, commercial pressure, and endless oversimplification. It is not failure to feel overwhelmed by it. In the end, the body tends to do well with consistency, adequacy, variety, and gentleness more often than with sharp swings of control. And that, perhaps, is reassuring. The truth may be quieter than the headlines, but it is often kinder too. We began tonight with a simple idea that nutrition is one of the longest conversations the body ever has with the outside world. Not a trend, not a punishment, not a contest of willpower, but an exchange. The world offers grain, fruit, water, roots, leaves, beans, fish, milk, seeds, oils, and countless other forms of stored life. The body receives them, transforms them, and from them builds motion, warmth, repair, thought, and rest. Along the way, we have followed that transformation through its many quiet stages. We have seen food become energy through carbohydrate, become structure through protein, become lasting reserve and cellular softness through fat. We have watched digestion dissolve the visible into the invisible. We have made room for vitamins and minerals, for fiber and microbes, for blood sugar, hydration, appetite, meal balance, aging, and the long patience of the body as it adapts to changing conditions. And perhaps the most reassuring truth is that the body is not asking for perfection. It is asking more modestly for support. Enough energy to keep the lights on, enough protein to repair, enough variety to cover the smaller needs, enough fluid to carry everything where it must go, enough steadiness that hunger, concentration, and sleep can unfold without too much turbulence. There is wisdom in that word enough. Modern life often pushes nutrition toward optimization, toward the fantasy that if we controlled food precisely enough, we might finally become immune to fatigue, illness, appetite, aging, or uncertainty. But the body is not a machine waiting to be perfected. It is a living system, adaptive and vulnerable, resilient and finite. To nourish it well is not to conquer it. It is to cooperate with it. So perhaps nutrition, at its gentlest, is a form of respect. a way of acknowledging that this body, which carries you through every ordinary and extraordinary hour, requires care that is repeated rather than dramatic. Breakfast after waking, water after thirst, soup during illness, protein after effort, fruit in summer, warm food in winter, a meal shared with others, a meal taken alone in peace. These are small acts, and yet they accumulate into a life. As the night deepens, let the subject grow simpler again. You do not need to memorize every nutrient or solve every debate or eat in a flawless way to belong to your own body. You only need to return again and again to the quiet practice of nourishment. That return is its own kind of wisdom. The world slows, and so do we. Somewhere inside you, the chemistry continues. Cells repair, signals travel, energy is managed, water moves, tissues renew. The long conversation goes on in silence, and for tonight, that is enough. Good night.